Hi, my name is Gene Monterastelli, and the video you are about to watch is a recording from the 24 Hours of Tapping, which is an event that is held annually to support the Peaceful Heart Network. If you appreciate or learn anything from this video, the easiest way for you to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network, who has worked with over 300,000 migrants, immigrants, prisoners, folks in disaster areas by bringing tapping to them. As you watch the video, across the bottom, you will see a link where you can support their amazing work. And I hope you enjoy this conversation. Steve Wells is a leadership coach and peak performance consultant from Perth, Western Australia. He has been researching and teaching energy techniques and tapping for the past 28 years and conducted the first publicized random control trial of EFT for treating specific phobias. He has helped thousands of people worldwide to release resistance, achieve their goals, and to live their values. Steve is the founder of Intention Tapping, which we're going to talk about today, and the co-creator with Dr. David Lake of the Simple Energy Technique, SET, and Provocative Energy Technique, PET. He is the author of 100% Yes, The Energy of Success, the co-author of 5 books. Steve is an inspiring teacher who presents practical techniques to help you get better results with less stress. Here is my conversation with my friend, Steve Wells. For the uninitiated, what do you mean by intention tapping? Because I know, like, you and I have had lots of conversations about this, but a number of people who are joining us over the course of this have not had an opportunity to experience what you're talking about here. So it's not just an intention while I'm tapping. What is intention tapping? And then we can use that to kind of set up the rest of the conversation.
Okay, so it's a way I discovered through my own experiences. Usually, I tend to learn things through life lessons, often with pain, and this was one of them. So I'm open to learning them through joy as well, but for some reason we pay more attention when we're in pain. So when I was in pain a few years back, I discovered this process, and quick story: I had a heel spur, and I was trying to get running again, and I was frustrated that I couldn't run, and I was in pain, and I was doing everything I could to get over that. I was using tapping. I was using a whole bunch of approaches, all combined to try, and I was throwing everything I knew at this, because it wasn't just the heel spur, and it wasn't just the fact that I couldn't move without pain. It was that we tend to get down on ourselves at those times when we're feeling vulnerable or when we're physically not well, and so on. And so, of course, the critical part of me was saying, well, you're also not moving ahead in your business, and you're also not moving ahead in, you're not a good enough husband, and you're not a good enough father, and so on. So all of that stuff kind of got tuned in for me at that time. And as you know, that kind of compounds it. I say that the judgment about the problem is another problem. And usually
yeah, and as you say that, like, I've gotten to the point now that I actually start with the emotion about the issue before I even address the issue. Not only is it another problem, for me, it's the problem. It's the thing I want to respond to first.
Well, I say that the self-criticism or the judgment, it puts a lid on the problem, so that you can't actually work on the problem itself until you take the lid off. So it kind of holds it in. So anyway, I was having all these experiences. I was led to back to Byron Katie's work. Byron Katie has a process called the work. It's fantastic. It's based on truth and inquiry. And she had a statement in her wonderful book called Loving What Is, which says, it's not the thought, it's the attachment to the thought that causes our suffering. And I'm like, yeah, I that's what it is. It's emotional attachments. And when you do tapping, you can have a thought that upsets you. Like in this case, if we talk about self-criticism, we have the thought, I'm stupid, and then that's attached to an emotion and a feeling and a way of being, if you like. It often depresses you and makes you feel rotten. And when you do tapping, you can have that same thought, and it doesn't hold on to you. It doesn't depress you. It doesn't affect you. And so, in some ways, the emotion has been attached, the attachment has been released from the emotion to the thought. So I'm like, yeah, tapping releases emotional attachments. And then I just had an insight. What if we could use intention to do this? Now, I've been trying to do intention for forever, and a million affirmations never did anything for me, hardly at all. Sometimes I thought they might have, but I couldn't get them to work consistently. But in that moment, I formed a different type of intention, and it was about releasing attachments. And that is the key. I think that's what makes these intentions work, because it's not about attaching to something, it's about releasing something that's causing your suffering. So I just formed a simple intention. I release all my emotional attachments to this problem. And instantly I was like, like I felt a movement of energy. I did a big yawn. All the things that happen when you do tapping and it works just happened instantly when I used this intention. And it was stunning me. And I'm like, wow, that was good. So then I'm like, well, let's try it again. So I focused on another aspect of the problem. I said, I release all my emotional attachments to this. Again, another big shift. And then another big shift. And every time I did it, I had a shift. And then I became aware of a tightness in my chest. And I'm like, yeah, when we have an emotional attachment, when we have something that's upsetting us, we also have something going on in the body, you know, a disturbance in energy flow, if you like. That's where we feel our feelings, in the body. And so we feel it as a disturbance in the body. And so again, I'm like, well, yeah, tapping restores the energy to flow. When you have a disturbance in flow or some kind of resistance, tapping helps to get things back into flow. And again, I had the insight, what if we could use intention? And I formed the simple intention, I restore the right energy flow to my chest. Big, you know, it's happening again now. Big, easy, expansive, deep breath. And then the whole problem was better. I felt better about the whole problem. Now, I wasn't using tapping at that time. I was just using these intentions. Later on, I combined it with tapping, and now I call it intention tapping. And so it's a particular type of intention. These intentions are primarily about releasing the emotional attachments that are causing us to suffer behind our problems and restoring the body energy back to flow and balance. And so, you know, since that time, I've discovered a whole bunch of ways of doing it. You know, we now have practitioners using intention tapping all over the world. It's a great thing. But the main thing is, for me, I keep finding that I can do more and more with it. And you know, those problems that I had back then are in the past. It's a memory rather than an issue. So yeah, so intention tapping is a combination of a particular type of intention with tapping. The tapping that we use is a simpler version of tapping than EFT, even though we use the same points. We don't use setup statements. We don't use reminder phrases. We just mindfully follow and allow and notice whatever comes next and apply the tapping to its presence.
And so what, I mean, I think there are two things that are kind of just in that discovery that I really love. Number one, I always think of tapping as an accelerant. Like whatever works for you, if you're tapping at the exact same time, we're going to accelerate that particular process, because we know simply stimulating the points is enough to create transformation and change. You know, and many practitioners,
That's
myself
right.
included, are trained in hypnosis and NLP and parts integration, all of that sort of stuff. And so like I'm doing all of those other skills and I'm tapping because it just supercharges just stuff that is already working in that really, really useful way. The other thing I think is real. The other thing I think is really important and is useful is, like, as tappers, most of us, when we learn tapping at the very beginning, we're told we need to be as specific as possible. And we interpret that to be, I must be specific. And it's not. The words are not magic. They're about bringing our attention to something specific, so it's present in our system while we are tapping. And so holding this very specific intention that you are talking about, where release, paying attention to, because like for me, because you and I have had a chance to play around with this in the past, like sometimes there is an emotional response just to the phrase, you know, I'm giving myself permission to, you know, no longer to be emotionally attached to this thing, this issue, whatever. And judgment and other things can come bubbling up just by paying attention
so whatever
to the
is
intention.
The next thing, whatever is the next thing is what you do next. And so that's the great thing about this. And the other thing is you don't need to furrow your brow. You don't need to, when you say hold the intention, actually all you really need to do is make the intention and then just let it do whatever it does and trust your unconscious to bring up whatever is necessary next. And so with this process, we don't need to be specific, because we can start as global as we like, and then we trust the unconscious to give us the next aspects of the process. And so it's a process of learning to trust your unconscious, and also ultimately trusting yourself, because this is realizing that you are more than you think you are. You are far vaster, and you have far greater capacities than you believe that you have. And that's because you have been schooled into being small, or into being the way you see yourself, into being a Gene Monterastelli or a Steve Wells or a whatever it is that you think that you are, and whatever that means in terms of how good you are, or what you can do or what you can't do, and stuff like this. And I've learned that's all BS. It's all BS. It's belief systems, right? It's also like the classic meaning of the term BS as well. It really is. It really is.
And so as you say that, like one of the fundamentals that I work from is this idea that change can only happen if I change the way I see the world, the way I see myself, or both. Either I see it as not being dangerous, so I act in a new way. I see myself as worthy.
Yes.
I show up and I feel in a different way. And so that's what you're talking about here, is shedding the stories, the cultural stories, the lived stories, the whatever that is defining us. And as long as I see myself in a certain way, I'm not going to be something different. I have to change the way. And tapping is so good and liberating, and releasing those things that have its hooks into us, but just letting go of those stories.
But here's the thing about it. For me, what I've realized is it isn't just the stuff like, okay, so we use this stuff when we're feeling down or when we're feeling upset. And so therefore we realize that we have a problem, and we're beating ourselves up, or we find ourselves believing that we're not good enough or whatever. What I found with intention tapping is that I've also released my attachments to a lot of stuff that I didn't even know I was seeing in a particular way. I just thought it was the way it was. It's just the way it is for me. I'm that kind of person. This is my life, and this is the way I have to deal with things. And now I think, wow, if that can change, what else have I been believing which is BS? Well, maybe it's all BS, really, and we don't have to attach to any of it. We can use any of it, but none of it is really us. None of it really encompasses what we are. And when we believe ourselves to be a certain way, it's like we take the whole totality of possibility of human experiencing and responding and performing and whatever, and we put it through a thin slit of possibilities. Like, I have to be like this, and I can only stay within this, and this is the way I am. And that's BS. It really is. And it's liberating to not only get over those beliefs, but really often what I've found is that underlying those beliefs are even stronger judgments. So, for example, I've got over my not being a real man stuff, right? That I had my whole life, because I couldn't do home handyman things. I wasn't that kind of bloke, I had other skills, and I developed them, and I came to believe, hey, I don't have to be like that. I can be like this. I can, I'm so proud that I can, develop these skills and have empathy and so on, and work with people, but, and pay other people to do what they're good at and so on. But actually that was a way of coping with that belief. What's happened is that belief with intention tapping of the way I was has dropped away. And now I find myself, seeing home handyman things I would have ran from, and just thinking, why don't I just do it? And then you know what? I not only do I find myself being able to do it, I'm not worried about having to work it out, and I'm thinking differently. Like, I can think mechanically in ways that I couldn't even think before. Like, the whole thing has opened up for me. And it's bizarre that at this age in my life, I'm actually doing more of this kind of stuff just for the fun of learning it and doing it than I ever would have done. And all that, hating myself for not being it's just gone. And all that aversion to doing it and running away from it, it's gone. Yeah.
And so, like, that dovetails neatly into having this conversation about self-criticism, because like in some ways, self-criticism is an emotional attachment to a particular outcome or particular way of being.
Yeah, well, we learn
like
when
I'm
we're growing
attached
up.
to acting a certain way, and because I'm going against that, I am failing, I'm doing wrong, I'm whatever those particular things are.
That's right, because we attach to, we're brought up to be in a world where people say, oh, you can't do that, you're a loser. If you can't do that, you're not a real man. If you can't do that, you're not a good woman, whatever. And so, and of course, we are trained by reward and punishment through, pain and pleasure. And usually most of us, if we get through life, there are lots of, teachings which are done with pain, because, people pay more attention when pain is involved, as I was mentioning earlier. And so the pain of that criticism, the pain of that punishment gets attached. Now, there's a number of ways that happens. One is like, okay, someone says you're stupid when you do something wrong, and of course they're very angry and they're very upset, and you pick up on the energy, and so the energy and the feelings of that and the upset of that is attached to the thought you're stupid. Okay, and of course we can accept it and then we kind of play that on a loop internally, like either it's someone's voice saying you're stupid, or we go, I'm stupid, and then it seems like it's us saying it and us believing it. But actually, it's just an attachment to a concept with energy and emotion of when that attack happened, that hurt happened, that abuse happened, whatever it was that happened to us at that stage in our life. And of course, it's also a way of coping in a certain situation. If you learn, for example, like I have a client right now who's like, I can't speak up, otherwise I'm going to get hurt. Mm-hmm. And so that's functional in a dysfunctional family. It's a way of staying safe, but it doesn't help you when you have to go for an interview when you're an adult, or when you have to put yourself forward in a work meeting or something like that. It's like we learn to adapt to being in the war zone, and when we come out of the war zone, we have to update our nervous system and release our attachments to that being true now and everywhere.
And I think one thing that's really, really key in what you're saying right there is, like, it can become really, really easy for us to beat ourselves up for having these sorts of attachments, when the reality is it was a tool that we picked up to keep ourselves safe. Now, it could have been a tool at one point where it was useful and it's now no longer useful, or it's useful in context A and it's not useful in context B, or we were taught the tool by the people we were around, our lived experience, and we didn't know that there was a better way, that we've decided on a subconscious level, understanding the world in this way is how I become safe. If I don't speak up, then they're not going to notice me, then they're not going to judge me, and I'm going to be able to go through it. So we can understand the kind-hearted incompetence of that belief, as it's trying to do good by us. We just happen to be attached to a story or a tool or an outcome that isn't actually doing good by us.
Well, and it makes sense that your mind goes, okay, this is going to happen, so let me prepare you by reminding you of how that feels, if you're in that situation. So I don't even see it as us beating ourselves up anymore. I see it as us emotionally attaching to self-beating up thoughts. Okay, so self-criticism, actually what we call self-criticism, in even calling it self-criticism in a way, is another way of criticizing ourselves, because it's like we're to blame for doing it. Actually, no, the self-criticism is going on. It's going on in our mind like a recording of this thing that plays out, and it's your mind saying, hey, remember this is what it feels like, and this is what happens, and this is how, why you need to be prepared, and so on, trying to keep us safe. But then, of course, we have that going on, and then we blame ourselves for doing that, as if we're consciously criticizing ourselves. Well, why would you do that? You wouldn't want to do that. But of course, we become so attached to believing that those negative critical thoughts that we've internalized from judgmental others, or that we've attached to in moments of pain, we believe that they are us, and that defines us, so that our thoughts define us, and that our feelings are us as well.
There was a number of years ago here in New York City, there was an off-Broadway show about some artists trying to get a play on Broadway. And they were talking about the critical voice. And at one point in the show, they say, if someone walked up to you on a subway platform and said this stuff to you, you would think that they were not mentally stable. But when you hear it from inside of your own head, you think it is the gospel truth. Yes. And it's so interesting. And like you said, it feels true and it feels like me because it's already in the software. It's not input that's coming at us that we can bat away.
Yeah, we're so used to believing it. We're so used to saluting it emotionally. And so this is what I'm working with using intention tapping now. And this process has been so powerful. So, one day I had all these critical thoughts in my mind. So I'm using intention tapping on. So I'm noticing the thought, and the thought is, you're bad about this, whatever it is. And I'm using intention tapping. I'm saying, I release all my emotional attachments to this thought. And then there's another thought. I release all my emotional attachments to that. And then there was another one, right? And they just keep coming. And for me, at the time, I was getting little releases on each of them, but it felt like I was kind of like swinging from tree to tree with all the negative thoughts. And then I realized that the thoughts were coming from a place in my head. And that actually, instead of treating the thoughts, I needed to treat the attachment to that. And so I released my emotional attachments to that voice defining me. And in fact, I released my emotional attachments to that voice being me. And it was like I woke up and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm fine. I'm fine. I am fine, and I have been fine all the time. I've just been believing this rubbish that's kind of like playing on a loop in my mind, and believing that because that voice is in my head, it must be me. And therefore, if it's me, then I have to listen to it. I have to be defined by it. It's real, and I really believe it. Well, now I know that that's BS. And the reason why we suffer is because we believe our thoughts. That's the challenge. And so, Byron Katie uses her process for questioning the thought and saying, is it true? Well, I use the process of intention tapping. Anytime I'm attached to a thought, I can release my emotional attachments to that, and then there'll be a shift. And if it's a strongly attached thought, there'll be a big shift. But it's even better to release your emotional attachments to the source of those thoughts being you and defining you. That's what I did that day. And it was like, it's like opening up a doorway and seeing through. I say to my clients, it doesn't take much light to light up a room. You only need a pinprick of light to have enough light in the room to stop falling over stuff, And once you let a little bit of light in, then you can go, okay, how can I open this a little bit wider? And if you kind of follow the energy, and this is what we do with intention tapping, we follow the energy. Number one, in working with yourself, you notice where the energy is. If you're aware of your body, you notice where the strong energy is. If you're aware of the thoughts, you notice which one has got the strong attachment, and you release that. You notice where the disturbance is in the body. You restore the energy flow to that. And I think one of the strongest things worldwide is this attachment to believing the source of our thoughts. And for some people, it's not. For me, it's like in the back of my head, and it's like my own voice. But other people, it's like the voice of God, or it's the voice of their mother or their father or an authority. And so that's why they have to believe it, because they were told it by an authority. And once you release your emotional attachments to having to believe what the critical voice says, then it can just keep spouting out its stuff, and you just go, that isn't true. It's just thoughts.
Yep. Yeah. And as you say that, one of the frameworks I work with a lot is something I called SOD: safe, allowed, worthy, deserve. And safe is the place that we start because it's the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to keep ourselves safe. And over the course, the last 6 or 9 months, kind of playing around with that with my clients and my students, what I've come to realize is that allowed is just safety in the context of community. If I violate this community standard, I'm not allowed to do it. What I'm actually doing is I'm making myself unsafe inside of the community. So it becomes doubly treacherous. It is unsafe, and it is disconnecting, and it is isolating if we do that. And so if we're carrying that, of course, it makes sense. We're going to take that as gospel truth, because there's a part of us that says, I don't want to be ostracized. I don't want to be pushed outside of the tribe. I don't want to be set alone. And so the attachment to the story is it keeps me safe, and it keeps me in community, and it keeps me allowing to be here. And of course, if that were true, that we would want to operate from that particular place. And so it sounds coherent. It's coming from inside of my head. It must be true. And that's the reason why it's so hard to overcome that.
Darn right. Well, and that rejection, uses the pain pathways, and that's one of the reasons why it's felt so acutely and so on. And of course, it was, a survival mechanism for us to be in groups to survive. And so the group learns all kinds of ways to make sure that you stay within the group as well. And, a lot of those are judicious use of criticism, judicious use of rejection, or whatever. We withdraw our attention from you, therefore, you suffer the pain of being isolated or whatever. And so this is the challenge as well, because if you start being who you are, and you start releasing your emotional attachments to who you learn to be through pain and pleasure, then other people may not necessarily be 100% happy with that too, because you might go, well, actually, I'm not going to stay here where I'm not being treated well anymore. I'm no longer attached to your approval. I'm okay to be myself and to go to another place where people value me more, and so on. Or I'm going to move out of this relationship into one where I'm more valued, or whatever it is. Of course, we have to, sometimes people jump to moving out of relationships when they need to do more self-work as well. And,
right.
I, as someone who's been married for quite a long time, I can say there's a lot of times when I was ready to leave, but actually that was just me not willing to deal with my stuff. But, when you get clearer about this stuff, you get clear about what's really good for you, what's really good for others, and what's really good for the planet. And then you tend to do those kind of things, and you're drawn to them, Yeah.
And so with that being said, it's been a little bit of a heady conversation. I think this is one of those. This is one of those things that is so much better when we play with the tool a little bit. So I'd love it if you just lead us through, like, just kind of stepping into this, and as we do this, feel free to interrupt the process and just kind of talk through the process as we're doing this, just so that, because we're doing stuff that's unique and different, and so feel free to instruct as we tap.
Yeah, and thank you so much for volunteering to be a guinea pig again for this process. But
you bet.
If you're human, and I know you're always willing to be honest about your own stuff, and we talked about this before we even began today. Yep. We're both on a path, and we've both had the critical voice, and there's lots of ways that we can get hooked by that. So first of all is tapping, right? So be tapping the whole time. You can be tapping on the upper body points. You can be tapping in intention tapping, we combine a simple process of continual tapping on any points in any order for any length of time with the use of intentions. So number one is get tapping and be tapping. Apart from the upper body points, we also use the finger points, which, as you know, you can tap on like this with the fingers of the other hand, and we also include the ring finger. But you can also tap. Let me just get in front of the camera. You can also tap on the side of the finger points using the thumb of the same hand. So this is just a good way of continually tapping. It's non-fatiguing. It's good for using in public. So I can be tapping on my finger points under the screen here, and nobody has to know that I'm doing it. And I'll be doing that the whole time along with you. So, for now, I'm tapping on the upper body points. If you see me and don't look like I'm tapping on the finger points as well while we do that. And you can do the same if you want to. And second, if we're doing targeted tapping, we need a target, an area where perhaps you get hooked into self-criticism or any self-criticism that you are aware of.
That's pretty easy. I got one right at the front of my head around some stuff in my business and how I'm not showing up quite the way I would like to. And that's an understatement.
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So the good thing, as I mentioned, with intention tapping, we can start globally. And so just say, I release all my emotional attachments.
All my emotional attachments.
To all my business shoulds.
To all my business shoulds.
And all my business judgments.
And all my business judgments. And folks, as you're tapping along with us, in the place of business, insert what you need to be working on right now.
Yeah. And as you know, if you tap along, you're going to get benefits. You're going to borrow benefits. Then we just let it go like you're doing, and you just mindfully notice whatever comes next in your mind and or body.
So I notice opening here, and then it goes from global to now it's like ticking off really specific. It's not you're letting down, but it's you didn't do and you didn't do and you didn't do. And there's actually a little laundry list, a little to-do list, just all of a sudden showed up with all the specifics. Yeah.
And this is like all the mind's reasons why you deserve to be punished or whatever that is. It's, and as we mentioned, you start global and let the specifics come up if they're ready. So just say, I release all my emotional attachments.
All my emotional attachments.
To all those things.
To all those things.
And everything they mean about me.
And everything they mean about me. It's really interesting. So in my head, we have this list. And as we were starting with the intention, it was kind of like an in-game, or not in-game, the one before in-game where they snapped and they all disappeared into dust. I could, but then whatever that last phrase was, what it says about me, it was almost like, and it like came back into sharp relief again, because it wasn't the thing, it was a story about me. And all of a sudden with that last phrase, it didn't get lighter. It actually got heavier all of a sudden.
That's right. Because when the energy moves, so what happened is that other aspect, which wasn't as big an aspect, it moved out of the way, and this one moves into its place and now becomes the focus. So now you notice, and so that what it means about you is a heavier thought, or a more strongly emotionally attached concept, if you like. It's still a concept about yourself and so on, but it has feeling attached, right? So notice whatever you notice, and whether it's the thought or if it's how the feeling is manifesting.
Yeah, because for me, like the thing that is rattling is like, because I have a process brain, because I'm a practitioner, I think about this. The thing that shows up immediately is how much pride I take in being a hard worker, doing the right thing, being ethical, keeping my clients safe, and all of that. And this is like,
oh man, okay. So as you enumerated each of those, I just felt.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for 100%.
That's a major cross to bear, man. Just say, I release all my emotional attachments.
I release all my emotional attachments.
To having to do all of that.
To having to do all of that.
All the time.
All the time.
Now you keep tapping, and I just need to say that I know that the EFTs are going to be frustrated. It's like, you're not going into specifics. Well, actually I am. I'm going into the specifics of what the attachment is, because you can be attached to having to do all that all the time. That's what I'm assuming is one part of the attachment here. But let's see. Let's just see. Judge by results. See what it does.
And so it's continuing to open here.
Mm-hmm.
And now the heaviness is like almost behind my eyes, not teary,
Yeah.
but there's just that heaviness there.
All right. So just put your attention on that feeling behind your eyes and just say, I restore.
I restore
The right energy flow.
The right energy flow.
To all of this emotion.
To all of this emotion.
Could have said energy, but just because you said the word tears, energy, emotion, same thing to me.
Yep. It's interesting. With the release, there is just a fatiguing, but not like a, but like, oh, it's been a long day and I've worked really hard and boy, am I fatigued and I can't wait to climb. Like I've done hard work. And it's just like, it's just like, taking off the work boots at the end of the day and the body just decompresses from that sense of that release.
And so sometimes that might be like, okay, it's time to rest or whatever. But I always just say, good yawning, good sign, as everyone knows. Let it keep moving. Just take the next aspect, whatever it is. Because when you release emotional attachments and restore energy flow, you're never going to lose anything that's good and real and true. So if that fatigue is what you're meant to be feeling, then that'll be good. You use it, you go to sleep, you go and have a rest, whatever it is. But it could also be another aspect. So we just test it. Just say, I restore.
I restore.
The right energy flow.
The right energy flow.
To all my fatigue.
To all my fatigue.
And everything that's triggered it.
And everything that's triggered it.
And everything that's caused it.
And everything that's caused it. And again, there's just this sense of like, it's losing its density. It's just, again, that sense of just kind of like dust blowing in the wind as it gets lighter and lighter.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, even in the fatiguing, there is like energy, but not energized. I don't know if that makes sense, but like there's a sense of restoration that is happening, but it's not like I'm ready to go run a marathon, I'm ready to go tackle my to-do list, but it's more just like, okay, awesome, we can handle this. Like, in the moment, in the middle of it,
just let the energy keep doing whatever it's doing. It'll go in, it'll percolate through, it'll open things up, wake things up, calm things down. Whatever it needs to do is what it will do. And we're just going to trust that process. And we just allow it to do what it does. And we're just open to noticing what happens next. And what happens next could be another thought, could be an image, could be a memory, could be a feeling, could be a sensation.
And what's interesting this time is typically when I clear resistance to an action, it comes with a sense of focus and energy, and it's not like a mania, but it's just like stepping into it. And what's really interesting now, in the middle of a long event, there is no sense of distraction of, I need to go get that. It's kind of like, Monday morning, once we get through all the mishigosh of getting all of this cleaned up and all of that, and I actually get to sit back down at my desk, then there is a focus and presence to that thing.
Which is deal with that when it happens, if it happens at that time, and then you can drop the cross kind of thing.
And what's interesting, and I'm gonna have to play with this to see what this is like, because we get a chance to just keep playing with this stuff very easily, is I'm trying, like, the thing I don't know, because this is a unique experience, is I don't know if it's a unique experience because I'm in the middle, obviously, of another project right now in these 24 hours. So I have to be present to something completely different. And my system is going, okay, we're going to do it Monday. Or if it's just a different, because like I said, normally my engagement of overcoming some sort of critical resistance is awesome. Like, we're going to do the thing now. Like I tap on my to-do list every single morning because I'm creating the space for 90 minutes where I just go and I do the things, and it's not oppressive. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm being driven, but it's interesting. My response to the action is different this time. And I don't know, like I said, I got to play with this to figure out what's going on here.
Good. All right, well, try this one. This will be interesting for you. Just say, I release all my emotional attachments to having to figure this out just right.
And what's interesting is, like, there wasn't a sense, like it was a sense of curiosity. There was no sense of oppression to that.
I know.
But there's an expansion that is coming with the curiosity, even like I love being in a state of curiosity, because it's so, for me, curiosity is so unjudgmental. Like I set aside 3 hours a week in my business just to play for things to see, and they may not bear any fruit, but just like, that's of real value for me. But again, it just supercharged that sense as we're sitting here in it.
Yeah. So I'm, as you know, I'm testing, right? You know, that's what Gary Craig taught us. Run it up the flagpole and see if he salutes it emotionally, you know, and so on. But your only job when you're doing this for yourself is just to notice whatever comes next. And then I say, sacrifice everything on the altar of releasing. No matter what comes next, good, bad, or ugly, release your emotional attachments to it, because I've learned that even so-called positive things can be hooks sometimes, because to be a certain way, or to have to be, you know, even if you know, I said to one person I was working with who said, oh, I'm just completely unremarkable. And so we did some tapping, and then she's like, well, actually, I am quite remarkable. And I said, yeah, but do you want to have to be remarkable all the time now?
Right.
So now we release that, so that you can be remarkable and you can be free to be unremarkable.
I can remember I took a Buddhism class in university, and one of the concepts the professor was talking about was, you release, you have insight. And because we are human, the first thing that we do is we immediately attach to the new insight.
Right.
And then it takes time to release. And the moment we release, insight shows up, and then we immediately emotionally attach to that new thing. And I think it's so fascinating what you're talking about here, is that like we get the little happy juice rush of this new insight and this sort of thing, but it's I hadn't thought about that. And that can become my new attachment. And I want to have that as an option. I want to have that as an aspect. I want to have that something I'm tuned into, but I'm not changing one identity for another. I'm letting go of something I'm attached to things that I can try on that work for me.
Exactly. And the mind's infinite capacity to create new attachments, because it wants to go, okay, I want to set the guidelines for the rest of my life now, you know. Well, actually, you do that, the minute you do that, life changes. And then suddenly something comes out of left field or right field or whatever, you know. So what's more powerful is to be able to adapt and flow with whatever happens. And so that's why life is a constant process of releasing attachments for me now. And then that allows me to deal with life the way it is, rather than the way my mind has become attached to it being, or the way my mind is projecting that it should be.
Yeah, one of the things that I was just talking about the last couple of weeks with my students was this idea of, when we're looking at the past, there's two stories. There's the story that we tell, and there's the meaning that we give to it. And what we're needing to do
again. Sorry, there's a story that we tell,
and the meaning we give to it.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a separate story. You know, they're the facts as we understand them, which are accurate-ish because we're bad eyewitnesses, because we're human. But then there's the second layer, the second story, this meaning that we're sticking on top of it.
Well, and that's the emotional story. And the stronger the emotion, the more we're attached to that meaning. And when you're attached to one meaning only for things in life, now you're only seeing things in one small way. But usually that attachment of meaning is a negative one. You know, this means I'm wrong. This means I'm unsafe. This means I'm a bad person. This means I'm not good enough, because we're getting trained all the time. And there's a million ways that you can not measure up, especially when you go to school and there's, you know, like, you can be great at sport, but if you can't do maths, you know, you can't add up, then you're going to get that feeling over there. But if you're great at maths and you're no good at sport, well, then you're still not good enough. and it's
So if
many
you could
ways
just,
to be wrong.
yeah. So if you could just remind us of the phrases again, just so
Well,
that
yeah, and
now that folks have played with it, they can remember it again.
and let's do that by checking in, right? So just if you wouldn't mind, just check in how you're at now with that thing that we
I
did a
just
little bit
feel
of
light.
tapping on.
Yeah, I just feel light and limber. Like I feel supple, and
Yeah.
there's not like I said before, there's not this driving sense to go solve something or figure something out or whatever. It's like I am in the moment, and we'll do some tasks later, and there's just not any emotion there with it.
Yeah. Okay. And so if there were a disturbance in your body, then we would be restoring energy flow to that area. If there were a disturbance in the mind in terms of like an attachment to a negative thought or a negative belief or a critical thought, then you're releasing emotional attachments to that. And so you just basically, I release all my emotional attachments to X, where X is whatever the problem
whatever it is.
Could be the belief, could be the thought, could be the person, could be the event, could be the thing. But in this context, it's usually some kind of judgment or criticism. And so a big category is like shoulds. And so I released all my emotional attachments to what I should be doing or what I should not be doing, is an example. And then, if you have a feeling in your body, like say, you have a disturbed feeling in your stomach, you can restore the energy flow to that area just by, again, tapping and just saying, I restore the right energy flow to my stomach. You can also say, I restore the right energy flow to this feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And if it were an emotion, you could say, I restore the right energy flow to this sadness or this anger or whatever it is. So, this is, I'm giving you the quick self-help version of this. It's two basic intention statements, releasing emotional attachments and restoring energy flow. But I can tell you, 95% of the time with 95% of my issues and with 95% of my clients and their issues, these are the key intention statements I use. And then it's just a matter of number one, trusting in the process. Number two, tapping and allowing it to do whatever it does. And then taking the next thing as the next target. And
I release my emotional attachment to the agenda that I have when I sit down to tap today. Awesome.
Yeah, excellent. And we ask for everything that we want. This is something I learned from Larry Nims way back when we studied with Gary Craig, and he invited Larry Nims along. He said, ask for everything you want. So when we give that to the unconscious mind, we say, I release all my emotional attachments associated with this. And then what happens is, of course, you don't release all of them in one round. But what happens is your unconscious mind gives you the next piece, and then the next piece, it opens up that program and starts to release all of them.
Awesome. Well, as always, Steve, I love these conversations, and I love the way you keep pushing the field forward and trying new stuff all the time.
Well, I love the way that you manage to do these things, and you keep putting yourself out there to not just putting yourself out there, you're actually putting us out there. So you're allowing us the opportunity to give people the good stuff and so on. So I really appreciate that. And you're working your tail off on our behalf. I hope this helps you to not have to suffer that as much. That would be nice if I can contribute something to that. But I really appreciate your contribution to the tapping world. I really do.
You bet. Awesome. I'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Okay. Ciao. See you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation. As you look at the screen right now, you can see a link to the entire playlist of every single conversation for previous 24 hours of tapping. There are over 120 presentations waiting for you. And please consider supporting the amazing work of the Peaceful Heart Network.